Are you interested in buying a whole, half, or quarter beef from a farmer or rancher? How about getting all your beef cuts for ground beef prices? Or would you just like to know where your beef comes from? Got some questions? This video is for you. Locker beef or freezer beef, straight from the ranch to your freezer. Food security. Let's go check out the ranch freezer, see the beef. So here's the beef that we processed last February 2024. A whole beef will completely load this freezer. This is what we got left. It's October 1st tomorrow. Here's our ground beef. I love the way they vacuum seal that. I'll give you an idea of the fat content of this beef. It's pretty lean. We're all out of rib steaks. Here's a T-bone. New York strip. I'm gonna take these T-bones home and cook them tonight. We'll have steak and peppers. Show you what the beef looks like cooked. So here's dinner tonight. I trimmed those T-bones into strip steaks, peppers, and 2 onions. Take it easy there, Swanson. What's the difference between live weight, hanging weight, and freezer weight? I'll bring these locker beef, these steers, in closer to the ranch headquarters, start feeding them probably about December 1st. When they're done with their finishing feed, they're gonna weigh close to 1,400 pounds. That's your live weight on the hoof. The steers will be delivered to the processor, and then we're gonna get a hanging weight. Hanging weight is the carcass. It'll be the hooves, head, hide, and guts removed. The hanging weight is probably what you're gonna pay for. That's the standard. If you're buying a beef, a whole beef, half beef, or quarter beef from a local farmer or rancher. There goes a nice little locker beef right there. I charge $4.50 a pound per hanging weight. A good rule of thumb to think about when you're going from live weight to hanging weight to freezer weight is 60%. That'll apply to most beef cattle. It might be different. You'll have a lower yield with dairy cattle, big bone, bonier cattle like that. But anyway, a 1,400 pound live weight on one of these steers, you multiply that by 60%, you're gonna come up with 840 pounds hanging weight. That's a pretty good average, 60%. Then you can use that 60% again to figure out your freezer weight. How much meat's actually gonna go in your freezer. The 840 pound hanging weight times 60% is gonna give you 504 pounds. That's what's going in your freezer. 500 pounds of beef for a whole beef. If you wanna figure for a half, just cut it in half, quarter, same thing. Cut it in fourths. If you decide to get a whole beef, make sure you have the freezer space for it. I believe this freezer is 16 cubic feet, and one whole beef will fit nicely in there. The dimensions of this freezer are 60 inches wide, 28 inches deep, and 34 inches tall. I like these chest deep freezes, but things can get lost and unorganized in them. I made these wood dividers just to help organize things. I can put things like roasts, short ribs here, steaks here, ground beef on this side. Yeehaw! What the? I told everybody, beef only. All jokes aside, this is what you can expect if you're getting a whole beef. Make sure your freezer's empty and running, ready to go. It's a good idea to wear some gloves. This beef's cold enough to burn your fingers. Also, get some help organizing and loading the freezer. After loading your freezer, make sure to check that it's running every day. That's a big investment. Backup power is important. Make sure to have a generator ready to go in case of a power outage. And then have fun. Try out new recipes and different ways to prepare and cook all those cuts of beef. We're going to answer some common freezer beef questions. Then we'll discuss where each cut comes from on a beef. And finally, we're going to fill out my cut sheet for this year together. If that sounds like a plan to you, stick around. The Locker Beef Project, the Feeder Steers 2025, this project is winding down, coming to an end. These steers have about 20 more days till processing date. So 1 year ago, I made processing dates for 4 steers on February 10th, 2025. I've got 4 of these steers sold as quarters and halves, and 1 for myself as a whole. We'll let these guys finish their breakfast. Let's go fill out a cut sheet and talk about cuts of beef. All right, inside, out of the cold. Let's talk about freezer beef. To start out with, I'm going to answer the 2 number 1 questions that people ask me when they buy beef from us. Number 1, I'm buying a quarter. Do I get front quarter or hind quarter? Usually that's not the case. This is definitely a good question to ask though. Usually, and this is what my processor does, they'll take a half of beef, and they'll split the cuts between the 2 people buying the quarters. My processor calls these split halves, and this is most likely what you're going to get. Question number 2, the second question I get the most often. How much beef is going to go in my freezer? And this all depends on the weight of the animal. Depends on that live weight and the hanging weight. However, in general, your quarter beef is going to be about 100, 125 pounds. Half beef, 200, 250 pounds. And your whole beef is going to be somewhere around 500 pounds of beef in your freezer. One other thing I just thought of to work out with the rancher or farmer you're buying beef from is who's paying the processing. I put the processing charge in the price of our beef. My customers just go to the processor, pick up their beef, and that's that. Just make sure everything's worked out and clear with the farmer or rancher you're buying beef from. Some farmers and ranchers might have you buy the animal from them, and then the processing is also your responsibility to pay for. Just make sure everything's clear. Well, those are the 2 most common questions I get, and something I thought of just now. If you have any other questions, please put them in the comments. I'll be glad to answer them. Now let's go over the main cuts of beef and filling out your cut sheet so you get everything you want and you know what you're getting. Cuts of beef. Let's start in the front and move backwards, starting with the neck. This is not a cut you're going to see on your cut sheet. Most of this goes to ground beef with the rest of the trim. Brisket is somewhat tough, fatty cut of beef can be turned into pure deliciousness by a pitman or backyard smokemeister. One thing to remember about brisket is its size. This cut of beef is hard to store in the freezer. If you do want brisket, but you are concerned about freezer space, ask your butcher to cut it in half. Moving back to chuck and shank, several good cuts here. My processor turns this section into arm roast, chuck roast, and the section closest to the rib turns into English rib roast. Arm roast and chuck roast are a perfect choice for the slow cooker. Cooked for 8 hours, slow and low, until they're fall apart tender. Chuck eye steaks and English rib roast are something you're going to want to cook a little more medium rare. Think not quite rib eyes, but really good. Plate section. Short ribs and trim for ground beef. Flank, and not pictured in this graphic, skirt. Flank is a cut of meat that comes off the side of the belly, and skirt is actually the diaphragm muscle. Don't pass these cuts up, they make the best fajitas. Now we're getting into the good goodies, the rib section. This is the most prized primal on a beef. Prime rib roast, rib steak, or rib eye. This is where you're going to have to make some decisions on your cut sheet. These cuts all come from the same place, and you can't get them all. Rib steaks are bone in, and rib eyes are boneless. Make your choice. There's about 12 on a side of beef. Prime rib roasts are all your rib steaks in one big chunk. These are for special occasions. Think Christmas, Thanksgiving, or maybe Bilbo Baggins' 11th birthday. My processor will cut 3 rib or 6 rib prime rib roasts. When filling out your cut sheet, you'll have to decide what you want. Do you want rib steaks with the bone or rib eyes, boneless? Behind the rib section is the loin, sirloin, and tenderloin. Here's where you're going to have to make another decision on your cut sheet. Do you want bone-in steaks, porterhouse and T-bone? Or would you rather have the boneless version, strip steak and filet mignon? You'll get about 12 T-bone steaks on half a beef, 6 for a quarter. Also from the loin section, sirloin steaks and sirloin tip, 8 to 10 sirloin steaks and a half beef, depending on how thick they're cut. Round, round, I get around. That brings us to the round section. Leaner and meaner back here. Rump roast, stew meat, and round steak. Your cut sheet will probably have an option for plain or tenderized round steak. Organ meats and miscellaneous cuts. Liver, heart, tongue, oxtail, soup bones, and dog bones. Waste not, want not. And finally, ground beef. All the trim and any beef cuts you didn't select end up here. For a half beef, you'll get somewhere between 75 and 100 pounds of ground, depending on how you filled out your cut sheet. All right, that's it. We've gone over all the major beef cuts. Now let's fill out a cut sheet together. Beef number and kill date. That's just for the processor. I'm getting a whole. It's custom. Name, address, phone number, so your processor can get a hold of you if they have any questions. Let's get into these steaks. T-bone, or New York strip and filet. I think I want T-bone, and I want them an inch thick. 2 steaks per package. Rib steaks, bone in, 2 per package. And I also want prime rib roast, 3 rib. I'm going to put a note down here stating that I want 1 3 rib prime rib roast and the rest cut into rib steaks. Round steak, 3/4 of an inch, tenderized. I want sirloin tip, plain, cut in half. Skirt and flank, yes, please and thank you. Now, what roast do I want? Chuck, arm, rump, and English rib. And how big a roast do I want? It's good to give the butcher a range. 3 to 4 pounds. Ground beef, 1 pound packages. Regular. Now my miscellaneous section. Soup bones, yes. Liver, yes. Dog bones, yes. I don't like short ribs. I'm not going to get heart. I would like some stew meat. And none of this for me. And that's it. My cut sheet's done. It's a pretty easy process once you know the cuts and where they come from, and which cuts are either or choices. Thanks for filling out a cut sheet with me today and going over all the cuts of beef. It is a really exciting experience filling up your whole freezer with beef. Support your local farmers and ranchers and your local processor. Local supply chains are the way to go. Keep your money local and know where your beef comes from. Locker Beef Project 2025 is complete. Here's a nice T-bone, package of T-bones from our beef. That is cold. Let me get it back in the freezer and we'll talk about it. For this year's Beef Project 2025, I fed 5 steers. I still have 1, Little Earsy, still feeding him. Then I sold 3, and I kept 1 beef for ourselves. Let's check it out. The steer, the beef that I kept for our freezer, had a hanging weight of 860 pounds. He had a live weight of 1,470 pounds. That puts the yield, the live to hanging weight yield, right at that 60%. Here's some of our steaks. These are T-bones and some sirloin tips. Here's what our ground beef looks like. Here's a real nice sirloin steak. That'll show you the intermuscular fat that's in this beef. And here's a good look at 2 nice bone-in rib steaks. And there's that T-bone again. Here's my scale book. I did weigh these ranch raised steers throughout their feeding process. I started feeding them 1st of December, and they were fed for about 70 days. I started these steers off slow on a low amount of grain, 2 pounds each per day, but by the end, they were all getting 18 pounds of grain each. Let's look back in the scale book and see how these steers did. We'll just focus on the steer in my freezer. I started these steers finishing ration 1st of December 2024. I weighed them December 15th, 2024. This guy weighed 1,225 pounds. Then I weighed him again January 4th, 2025. That time he weighed 1,265 pounds. Next weight was January 26th, 2025. He weighed 1,410 pounds then. And he was gaining about 3.5, 4 pounds a day. Last weight was February 8th, 5 days before processing. And at that point, he weighed 1,460 pounds. So 5 days later was processing day. He might have gained about 10 pounds. We'll just call it 1,470 pounds live weight. And my hanging weight at the processor was 860 pounds. That puts my yield from live weight to hanging weight right at that 60%. That was pretty good. I was happy with that. I think it comes out 58.5, something like that. So with that 860 pound hanging weight, that means I put right at 500 pounds of beef in this freezer. So that's how this project, the beef project, shook out this year. I'd like to thank everyone who bought beef from the ranch this year. Remember those local supply chains. As things get weirder and weirder, we're gonna need them more and more. Tariffs, trade wars, out of control inflation. I'd like to see everyone start voting with their actions. Let our representatives and leaders know that we don't need them. We'll do things ourselves. We'll grow our own meat, our own vegetables, and take care of our own energy supplies. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. Hope to see y'all next time at the Windmill Garden.